Hi everybody, welcome. This is Parshat Shmot, Tafshin Pei Aleph. It is Erev Shabbat. You may hear some hustle and bustle in the background. This is being recorded in real time. I want to share briefly some thoughts on this week's Parsha. In many ways, this is the Parsha of Miriam. Miriam is one of the great Jewish leaders in all of Jewish history, of course. She has a different name according to the Midrash, but I'd like to speak about and focus on her name because we know that 8 names, according to mystical thought, contain the essence of a person's identity. Miriam, if you divide the name into 2 parts, it's Mar Yam, which is translated on the surface as Mar Yam. Yam is water, body of water, and Mar is bitter, embittered, just like Maror on Pesach, on the holiday of Passover. So why in the world would we refer to Miriam as embittered waters? That sounds like it is not complimentary. It sounds like it's not what we would want to remember her by. We know that she had other names referred to, and we know that the name itself connotes a relationship. So a name is only as useful as the relationships around a person, just like we have many names for God, many names for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem. There are different ways of relating, and we have different nicknames of people who we are close to in our lives. So why is it that the Torah chooses Miriam as the specific name to relate to her? It seems to carry at least a somewhat negative connotation about her life being embittered. So let's just go through to answer that question briefly, and this is always food for thought. Much more study is going to be needed on all of these concepts. We have to look at a theme in Parshat Shmot, which I am grateful to my Rebbe, my spiritual teacher, Harav Ron Ami Meir, Rabbi Myers in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. And he pointed out to me many years ago that there is a hidden theme in this week's Parsha. And the hidden theme we'll see over and over again. We see it with the Mialdot, the ones who refused to kill the Jewish babies during the birthing process. They refused to abort the Hebrew babies. We see this with the process of Batia, who is the daughter of Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, refusing to drown the baby boy, which was Moshe, who grew up to be Moses, their lawgiver and their leader, the greatest prophet of all time. We see it in a theme of Moshe going against his upbringing. And we see the theme over and over again, and that's the theme of rebellion. That's right. We see it that the Mialdot, the midwives, they rebelled against the immoral order to kill the babies. We see it, Bat Paro rebelled against the decree of her own father when she drew the baby out of the water. And we see it with Miriam. Miriam rebelled against her father, who Amram, according to our tradition, was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, and he had decided to give up with procreation because of the embittered slavery, and he had divorced from Miriam and little Aharon, the small child Miriam and the small child Aaron, to separate from their mother Yocheved, and he reasoned that it's better not to bring children into the world if the boys are going to be sent to their deaths. And Miriam rebelled against him and said, with respect, Father, you're wrong, because you're worse than Paro. Just because Paro decreed on the boys doesn't mean that you should separate from your wife and to give up and not to have procreation. Much like the great Jewish heroines throughout Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, with their commitment to Jewish life, Miriam blazed that trail. So you have this theme of rebellion, of standing up for principles with the midwives. You see it with Miriam, you see it with the daughter of Paro, you see it with Moshe, who is rebelling and rejecting his upbringing in Egypt and standing up for what's right. You see it when Moshe flees to protect, actually, Tzipporah, eventually his wife, to save her, some non-Jews who were being harassed at the well. You see it, the reason Rashi tells us that they were being harassed is because Tzipporah's father, the famous Yitro, had rebelled against the Avodah Zarah of the paganism of his time. Over and over and over again, there are many more examples in the Parsha, and I would be happy to study with you at length about this because it's so fascinating as a theme. But if rebellion is the theme of Parshat Shemot, Miriam is the archetype. So there's a way to translate Mar, not just as embittered, but also from the root Mari, Mem Resh Yud, which means rebellion, Limrod, as we would say in Hebrew, or Mored. To be one who rebels is part of Miriam's destiny. And we can use rebellion for constructive purposes or use it for destructive purposes. Miriam was someone who did it for constructive purposes and blazed a trail throughout all of Jewish history. The righteous women of Jewish history began in this week's Parsha and forged the rebellion that would inspire a nation. So, coming back to our question from the beginning with, Miriam's name is, you could look at it as bitter waters, that which washes over a person's life of struggle and challenge, or you could look at her name as the one who rebels in her essence, washed over with the strength of rebellion to stand up against the forces of that which are bitter. So it is not that she succumbs to the bitterness, but it's that she's able to utilize her strength to stand up and cope with anything that life throws in her. And that's the lesson for us nowadays in our time, in a time of unprecedented pain, struggle, confusion in the United States. And we are here to hopefully bring a Shabbat of healing, and one to know that we can follow in the path just like Miriam the righteous, Miriam the prophetess, is able to rebel against the cynicism, the embitteredness, and the embittered forces within her. We have the ability to do the same thing, to bring light and spread joy through our rebelling against the forces of cynicism in the world. With love, Shabbat Shalom.